when naming ionic compounds, you first have to say, does the compound start with group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc, cadmium, aluminum, gallium, or ammonium? If so, we're going to write the name of the metal, or ammonium, and then you shorten the name of the nonmetal and add the suffix IDE. If it ends in a polyatomic ion, though, do not change the ending, just name it. So like KCl, K is in group 1A, so we don't have to put Roman numerals. So we just say potassium, and then Cl is chlorine, but we're going to change that to chloride. So this next one, Mg, is in group 2A, so we're just going to name it. We say magnesium, and then Br turns into bromide, so magnesium bromide. Na is in group 1A, so we just name it. But this is a polyatomic ion. I know it's a polyatomic ion because there's more than 2 elements. If there's more than 2 elements, it must contain a polyatomic ion. So ClO3 from our list, and again, we can look on our list. ClO3 is here, that's chlorate. So I'm just going to say that's sodium chlorate. Go ahead and pause the video and do these other 5 on your own. Restart when you are done. So Al2O3 should have been aluminum oxide. NH4,2O is ammonium oxide. And so when figuring out the names, you don't have to worry about, oh, but there's a 2 after ammonium, because remember when we were writing formulas, we were trying to balance the charges out. And so in this case, we just say that we see NH4 and we have O. Well, that's ammonium and that's oxygen. So ammonium oxide. ZnSO3. That case, the 3 does matter because I need to know, is it SO4 or SO3? So I know that's zinc, and then SO3 is sulfite. Na is in group 1A, and then PO3 is a polyatomic ion, so that's sodium phosphite. And the last one, K, is in group 1A. Nitrogen is going to turn into nitride, so potassium nitride. But what if the compound doesn't start with a metal that was listed previously, group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc, cadmium, aluminum, or gallium? If so, we need to use Roman numerals to indicate the charge of the metal, and we're going to put those Roman numerals in parentheses. Then, just like before, we shorten the nonmetal and add the suffix "ide." And if it's a polyatomic ion, we're not going to change it. To tell what the charge of the metal is, we have to look at the nonmetal, because the nonmetal is the one that doesn't change. Whatever the overall nonmetal charge is has to equal the overall charge on the metal. So for NiS, nickel is not in group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc, cadmium, aluminum. So we don't know the charge of nickel, but we do know the charge of sulfur. And sulfur is always a -2 charge. Since I only have 1 sulfur, then nickel must be a +2. So I would say that that's nickel 2 sulfide. For the next one, so first I look at the metal and say that is not group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc, cadmium, aluminum, or gallium. So I look at oxygen and say oxygen is a -2 charge. -2 times 3 gives me a -6. So iron must be a +6 overall because these have to add up to 0. But unlike the first example, I have 2 irons. So I divide going up. I multiply when I'm going down. 2 times 3 gave me 6. 6 divided by 2 gives me a +3. So the name of this one is iron 3 and then oxide. For our last one, we look at our metal and we do not know the charge of copper. So we look at ClO3, and ClO3 from our list of polyatomic ions is over here. It's a -1 charge. Because this is in parentheses, I'm going to multiply by the number outside the parentheses. If there wasn't parentheses, then I only have one polyatomic ion. So -1 times 2 gives me -2, which means copper must be a +2 because I only have one copper. So copper 2, and then that was chlorate, and I don't change the ending of chlorate. Going to try these 5 on your own. Restart when you have your answers. So for this first one, iron was not in group 1A, 2A, so chlorine is a -1. -1 times 2 gives me -2, so iron must be a +2. So iron 2 chloride. For the next one, Sn is not in group 1A, 2A, and so on. So I look at oxygen. Oxygen's -2. So 10 must be a +2 to cancel it out. So 10,2 oxide. Copper is not in group 1A, 2A. So I look at the next one, and this is sulfate. Sulfate's a -2. But like I was saying a few minutes ago, sulfate is not in parentheses. If it was, it would look like this and there'd be a 1 on the bottom. So this is -2 overall, so copper must be a +2 overall. So the name is copper 2 sulfate. And finally on the bottom, we have zinc, which is in group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc. So in this case, we don't care what the charge of Br is. We're just going to name the two pieces, zinc, and then Br turns into bromide. And finally, cobalt is not in group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc, cadmium, aluminum, or gallium. So we say PO4 is a -3. -3 times 2 gives me -6. So I must have a +6 overall, so it equals 0. So 6 divided by 3 gives me a 2+. So cobalt 2 phosphate. Okay, going to try these last 5 on your own. Restart when you're done. Make sure you're checking to see do you need Roman numerals or not. For this first one, strontium is in group 2A, so you should have just named it strontium and then hydroxide. The next one, copper is not in group 1A, 2A, so we had to look at iodine, and iodine's a -1, so copper had to be a +1. So copper 1 iodide. Lead is not in group 1A, 2A, so we looked at oxygen. Oxygen's a -2, but I have 2 of them, so that's -4. So lead must be a +4. Lead 4 oxide. Manganese is not in group 1A, 2A, so carbonate is a -2, and we have 2 of them, so that's -4. So manganese must be a +4. So manganese 4 carbonate. And then our last one, silver, is in our group 1A, 2A, silver, zinc. So we're just going to name our two pieces, and we get silver nitrate.